Alright, so obligatory, no I'm not back. And with that said, today's video is going to be a short one about the Beledar, big crystal that's going to appear in the War Within. Why am I going to be talking about the Beledar? Well, to make a very long story short, I'm kind of surprised a certain bit of lore surrounding World of Warcraft as a whole hasn't been brought up in relation to the Beledar, and with that in mind, I'm just going to hand it over to Lore Orchid Cho to demonstrate what that lore is.
Oh my! If I am not mistaken, it appears that the tale of Zao Sunseeker has come to life before us. According to the legend, long ago there were 5 suns that burned brightly in the sky. When the winds blew, their intense heat caused great wildfires. Crops wilted, villages burned, and families wandered endlessly to seek refuge from the flames. As the tale goes, Zao battled furiously, shooting his arrows high into the sky until only one sun remained. Zao has become corrupted too? Please, fight him with dignity. Zao was a true champion of our people. How sad it is to see his story tainted by the Shah. I am relieved to see justice served to his memory.
And yeah, that's it. The potential origin of the Beledar that I don't think I've seen anyone reference yet. Why does the Beledar act like a sun? Because it likely was one at some point in time. Was it a weapon? Most likely at some point in time. And apparently it got shot down by a Pandaren called Zao Sunseeker. From here, there are obviously a bunch of theories you can go into, from the crazy, like, if these things can alternate between light and shadow, and they have the same effect on the environment as shadow, was it potentially 9 shadow entities on Azeroth, including these crystals and then the old gods on top, or was it just a different set of circumstances? Or the Sunseekers are a pre-existing organization inside of the Blood Elves, so did their origins potentially start with the Pandaren and or this entire event that saw the sun shot out of the sky, or is it just a happy coincidence? Coming back to the more grounded theory, the implication, if the Beledar is related to this piece of lore, is there are at least 3 other crystals, potentially 4 other crystals the size of the Beledar, somewhere in Azeroth. Where on Azeroth specifically? Well, I can't be 100% certain, but I'm at least 95% certain that at least one of the crystals is in the northern eastern kingdoms, as in it's likely under Stratholme, Gilneas, or Alterac. Slash Lordaeron kind of, but mainly Alterac. And a very off chance it might be the Hinterlands as well, but yeah, that's the very off chance. And to just give the context for each of those locations, Stratholme still, for whatever reason, produces holy water, and you couple that with the fact that the Scarlet Crusade is seemingly going to be a relevant foe sooner or later, it wouldn't be that surprising if it turned out that that a crystal similar to the Beledar was below Stratholme. That said, you've also got Gilneas, and Gilneas for me is just one of those locations where, simply put, you cannot look at the layout of that city, especially when you realize it has a church in the middle of the city, and not be like, what did they build on / around / in relation to that got them to make a city that circular, as in it just doesn't seem like an accident. But that aside, we then get to the Hinterlands, which is mainly solely because of Jintha lore, and that's basically goes back to the Troll War, and basically the idea that whatever helped the Zandalari push the Armani into a frenzy that saw them basically force the elves and humans to work together to stop them, may have had something to do with a crystal equivalent to the Beledar potentially being shifted to its shadow phase for an extended period of time. And speaking of the humans and the elves, that leaves us with Alterac. And Alterac's got a lot going for it, in my opinion. And that's because, well, where should I start? Alright, let's start with the 100 human mages. So 100 human mages were the main reason why the humans and elves survived the Armani once upon a time, and it's how the elves and humans kind of became friends. Now, the thing about their entire event where 100 of them summoned a massive amount of fire to burn away not only the trolls but their lower, it's a very intriguing set of events solely because the fire they used had to have the ability to burn spirit. Now, I'm not saying that your atypical arcane fire from a fire mage can't burn a spirit in some way, shape, or form, but still, it just, at least for me, seemed to imply there seemed to be more to this fire. Couple that with the fact that mages are also well known for being able to summon things in, or at least open portals, and it makes me wonder if, instead of conjuring the fire, they instead opened a portal to somewhere and allowed the fire to flow through, which then burnt away the Armani trolls. Oh, and thinking about it, that does line up with the story of what those suns were doing before Zao took them out of the sky. But then again, that's only going to end up being correct if this theory is correct. But with that said, to add to the notion that there was something more to this fire and potentially just Alterac as a whole, we then get to what was introduced in Legion, which was just a fun little just tidbit that was added, but overall for me gave a lot more context to that mountain and region as a whole. And what I'm talking about is in the Paladin Order Hall during Legion, it introduced a bunch of statues which basically depicted a bunch of famous paladins throughout history. One of those paladins was a Stormpike. I forget her name, but it was basically a Stormpike dwarf, which, for those of you who know Alterac Valley, the battleground, they're the dwarves you're fighting alongside in that region of Azeroth. Now, what's interesting about this is that if you then couple this with the fact that dwarves are generally drawn to Titan facilities in some way, shape, or form, and the fact that these seem to be the only dwarven paladins within the lore, as, to be quite frank, dwarven paladins seem to be incredibly rare, it does make you wonder what's made them drawn to Alterac and what's in the region that's kept them there for so long. You then couple this with Lordaeron and Fenris Isle, which still have some potential hidden secrets surrounding it, because if I'm not mistaken, there is still at least, I think, 2 levels of the Undercity that haven't been explored, as well as the connection between the Fenris Isle and Lordaeron. And you basically get this interesting situation where if there is something potentially under Alterac, it potentially having connection to Lordaeron and the infamous Lordaeron 4 might not actually be that much of a stretch and or surprise. Oh, and just to clarify, the reason why I've excluded Silvermoon and Zul'Aman from this list is because ever since BFA, it's been heavily implied that both of these locations were proper Titan facilities at some point in time. Now, maybe the Titans had taken these crystals in to experiment on them, or created them, or, something along those lines, but at least for me at the moment, I'm under the impression that these crystals and the Titans aren't 100% connected, as in they're kind of separate from each other. And the reason why they've been implied to be Titan facilities is because of everything we learned about the trolls and Zandalar, and the fact that they have repurposed Titan structures before, and just that whole realization that the Titans have been experimenting on lower, and the general implication that the Zul's as a whole were likely, quite frankly, cages for lower to be experimented on. However, if memory serves me, and I could be completely wrong here, something about Zul'Aman which is very interesting is the second last boss from 4.2 in Cataclysm. I'm not sure if this was the same in vanilla or BC specifically, but in 4.2, what's very weird about Zul'Aman is the second last boss is a Shadow Priest, and the reason why this Shadow Priest is kind of strange is because, if I'm not mistaken, he doesn't have any lower attached to him, none whatsoever, whereas with pretty much every other Zul encounter throughout, the Zul's histories, most can have a attached lower to them, except for Oh geez, it would be Zul'Aman in Tanaris. However, then again, Tanaris is also built on top of a Titan facility and they still haven't explored that one either. But yeah, avoiding that tangent, Zul'Aman might have one of the crystals under them. However, if it does, it would have a shadow crystal or a shadow version of the Beledar under it. Although thinking about it, if it does have a shadow version of the Beledar under it, that would explain why Xal'atath has been preoccupied with the area and why Kithix specifically went to that part of the world. And if you're curious what I'm talking about, basically in Xal'atath's lore from Legion, we find out that Xal'atath was basically behind the Trollakir War, or at least helped kick off the Trollakir War. And one of the more obvious ramifications of that war was Xal'atath ended up in Zul'Aman when Kithix died. And then when she was removed from the region, seemingly by the elves before they had been turned into Naga, but then only turned up with the Naga, I think in the next chapter of her lore, she basically ends up going on a rather long journey to get back to that specific part of the world. As in, creates the whole Grim Batol situation, which literally helps her hopscotch most of the way up the continent with the Wild Hammer Dwarves after she betrays the Dark Iron Queen of the time. Anyway, now I'm beginning to wonder if the reason for that may have had something to do with a Beledar equivalent. As Zul'Aman does have a Beledar equivalent under it, it would also explain the Troll War frenzy the Armani went into, and if you then consider how most shadow crystals we know of, or shadow entities we know of, have been cleansed, so we're talking the Sunwell and the Dark Star, both of which required the sacrifice of a pure soul, you can also make the assumption that the reason why the crystal went dormant, potentially, was the sacrifice of Lord Dane during the Troll Wars. Or potentially his death is why the crystal activated, maybe? And hence why the mages were able to actually get the fire to begin with to wipe out the Armani. As in, they ended up channeling the power of this Beledar equivalent once it was activated by Lord Dane's sacrifice. And what's interesting is that would also then generally explain why after the Troll War and all that jazz, the Church of the Light, or at least why the Naru were able to find the humans and then start the Church of the Light, because if I'm not mistaken, it's after Lord Dane's death and after the Troll Wars when the Naru decided to start interfering with human affairs. Well, I guess that adds another potential location to the list. Zul'Aman might potentially also have a Beledar equivalent under it. But yeah, that's it really. This was a quick one, and bye.